Hey everybody, how's it going? I feel like the honeymoon period is over. You guys are like, I'm done with this. Stop teaching me already. uh, but hey, we still got this is really there's like 3 weeks left of school, right? We got um, you know the week of whatever that is. What is today? Today's the first. So the week of the 4th, and the week of the 11th, and the week of the 18th, and then we're done, right? So just to kind of give you a rundown, we're going to be doing section 11.8 in this week, um, reviewing and quizzing, or section 11.9, then quizzing, and then the algebra teachers have talked. We're going to do one set of lessons where it's like an algebraic connection to geometry. So yeah, that's the kind of rundown for the next couple weeks until the school year ends. Yeah. So let's get to it. Section 11.8, day 1. Next video is going to be section 11.8, day 2. Don't forget, make sure you catch the guided notes. Catch the guided, or make sure you print out the guided notes if you need to. If you don't, that's fine. Just follow along. Do wherever you need to. Yeah. See ya. Okay. So section 11.8, day 1. Now, you'll notice that section 11.8 is multiplying and dividing radical expressions. Okay, so those square roots that we were talking about, now we're going to be learning how to multiply and divide them. In section 11.7, we added and subtract them. So now we're going to be looking at multiplying and dividing. Section 11.8, day 1 is going to be the multiplying. Section 11.8, day 2 is going to be the dividing. So let's get right to it. You can use this thing called the product and quotient properties of square roots. And we've already kind of learned them to reduce down square roots. It basically was saying that, like, if I have, the square root of 24, I know that that is 4 times 6, right? This is that second day of reducing down square roots where it was like, you probably just would use the factor tree method. But we did know that this was possible, where we could say, okay, well, since we know that the square root of 4 is 2, we can call this 2 square root of 6, or 2 times the square root of 6. So basically what I can do is I can multiply things together. I can put things that, are 2 separate square roots and multiply them together all underneath 1 square root, okay? So let me show you what I mean here. So we're putting things back together. Again, notice that that's a multiplication sign. So what does that mean? That means that this is just, 6 times 8 is 48. So the square root of 48. Now you must reduce down the square root of 48. And I know you guys like to use the factor tree method, which is completely fine. 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4 2s and a 3. And we take some buddies. So buddy and buddy. So that means we get 2 2s on the outside to make a 4. Remember, that's multiplication on the outside. 2 times 2 is 4. And then in the inside, our lonely 3. Okay, and there's my answer there. Okay. Feeling good about that. All right. Okay, so now let's take a look at something. Now, what happens if we put a squared here? Now, remember that if I put a squared here, I can square both parts. I can actually distribute this. If this was a plus or minus sign in here, I wouldn't be able to distribute. I would have to FOIL. But because there's no addition or subtraction, I can just basically, distribute that square. The reason being is because this is really like saying this, right? Do I really need those parentheses there? Not really, because everything is multiplication. There's no distributive property or anything going on. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to change those. Oops. Oh, for real. I'm just going to change these parentheses into multiplication symbols. There we go. Okay, so this is all multiplication. So I'm going to multiply things outside and things inside together. So the 2 times the 2 on the outside make a 4. The 5 times the 5 makes a square root of 25, which is basically just 4 times what the square root of 25 is 5. So 20 is my answer. Now, there's an easier way to get to that. If I just think about distributing that sign, this is really 2 squared and the square root of 5 squared. Now, what happens with this 2 squared? That's just a 4. The square root of 5 squared, that cancels each other out, leaving just a 5 or 20 right here. Okay. I would probably go this route rather than going this route, just to reduces the amount of steps you have to do. Okay. Now we can include some variables here. 3y and 12y make 36y squared when we multiply that together. Square root 36, you get 6. Square root y squared, you get y. Answer. Quick and easy. Okay. Again, just multiplying here. Same thing. 2m and 14m multiplied together make 28m squared. Now 28 is not a perfect square, so let's reduce that down. 2 and 14 and 2 and 7. So the 2's are the buddies coming out. This m squared becomes an m on the outside. The only lonely guy left in there is that 7 right there. Okay, and that's my answer. All right. Okay, so that was just if we had two things, no adding or subtracting signs. But what if we do have adding and subtracting signs? Well, then we just have to basically distribute like we would if this was just a number sitting on the outside. And really, that's all it is anyway, right? The square root of 3 is just a number, just underneath a radical. So this would be square root of 3 times 7, or 7 square root of 3 minus square root of 3 times square root of 8 is the square root of 24. Since they're both underneath the radical, we can multiply them together. Please don't make this the square root of 21 when you go in here. That is just, the 7 is on the outside, so leave it on the outside. Okay, so here is 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. I have a buddy set of 2's coming out. So this is 7 radical 3, which is already reduced, minus 2 radical 6. That is not reducible there because this is a radical 6 and this is a radical 3. We cannot combine them, and they don't reduce in any other way. Let's try another one. Okay. So we've got 2 radical 2 times radical 8. That gives me a radical 16. A radical 2 times a radical 18. That gives me a radical 36. 18 times 2 is 36. All right, well, that's pretty nice. That's 4 and 6 to make 10. Sweet, that was easy. Let's try a couple more. All right, same thing here. Square root of 5 times the square root of 10 is the square root of 50. And then I have the square root of 5 times this piece over here. Now, remember that you multiply things outside. Notice that the 4 is the only thing on the outside between these two terms. So that stays on the outside. The things inside get multiplied together. The radical 5 and the radical 3 make radical 15. Reduce down the 50. This is 2 and 25. And then 5 and 5. So buddies with the 5 come out. 5 radical 2. Now, this is just 3 and 5. There's no buddies to come out. So it stays 4 radical 15. And that cannot be reduced. Don't make that 9 radical 17. That stays, because remember, these have to be like radical terms, and those are not like radical terms. Continue on here. Distribute in here. Now, notice that this whole thing I'm multiplying is a 5 radical 5. So this negative 4, nothing on the inside of a radical, combines with the thing on the outside of the radical. Negative 20, and then the radical 5 has nothing to combine with. Radical 5. Do this in here. Okay, the 5 and the 6 go together to get a 30. And again, we're multiplying. And the radical 5 times the radical 5 gets us a radical 25. Now, this is already reduced. Negative 20 radical 5. This is not reduced. Radical 25 is just 5. So it'd be like saying 30 times 5, or 150. Negative 20 radical 5 plus 150. Now, remember back in chapter 7, we learned the FOIL method. That's going to come up again. What is the FOIL method? Well, first, outer, inner, last, right? But watch how this applies to these square root things, right? This almost looks like a binomial, right? Binomial times a binomial. We do that FOILing method. You can multiply the first together, the outers together, the inners together, and then the last together, okay? We're going to do that same thing here. Remember that this squared is really like saying 4 plus radical 3 times 4 plus radical 3. Okay. So when we FOIL this together, first, 4 times 4 is 16. Outer, 4 times radical 3 gets me a 4 radical 3. Remember, you don't combine that. Don't make it radical 12. 4 is on the outside, 3 is on the inside. Don't combine them. And then we do the radical 3 times the 4. Radical 4 radical 3, and then the radical 3 times the radical 3. Now remember, you could make this radical 9, but you can just skip that and say just 3, because square root of 3 times square root of 3 is like the square root of 3 squared, which ends up just being 3. Okay. Now we combine it, 16 and 9, or sorry, 16 and 3 combine to make 19, and then we have here and here to make 8 radical 3. 19 plus 8 radical 3. Don't make that 27 radical 3. This one doesn't have, 19 doesn't have a radical 3, so you can't combine it. Let's take a look here. First, 3 times 2 is 6. Outer, 3 times radical 8 is 3. Oops, forgot my plus sign. Plus 3 radical 8. Inner, I'll do it in the same color. Negative radical 8 times 2 is negative 2 radical 8. And then radical 8 times radical 8, negative times a positive is a negative. Radical 8 times radical 8 is just 8. You could say radical 64, which is just 8. Right? Combine like terms here and here. I get a negative 2 minus radical 8. Don't think that we're done, though. You have to reduce down all square roots. This is a 2 and a 4 and a 2 and a 2. Buddies with the 2 coming out, which makes it a negative 2 minus 2 radical 2. That's a lot of 2's there, but that's my answer. One more of those. First, 4 times radical 3 gets us a 4 radical 3. 4 times a 5 gets us a 20. Radical 3 times radical 3, negative times a positive is a negative, negative 3. And negative radical 3 times a 5 is a negative 5 radical 3. Okay, 20 and the 3 make 17. Then we have a 4 radical 3 and a negative 5 radical 3 to make negative 1 radical 3, or just negative radical 3. That's my answer there. Okay, so I hope that foiling method is ringing a bell. That's really it for today for this lesson. So make sure you're getting down all those notes. Again, we're going to have a quiz over this next week with sections 11.8 and 11.9. All right, see you later, folks.